Well, a form of community transformation happens in this parable, in the community between the Father and the Son. So that's what I want us to look at today. Training leaders for community transformation is one of three critical issues that Presbyterian World Mission is focused on, and what our family has been invited to come to Niger to help the church with. But as you know, community is not always an easy thing. It can be difficult because it involves so many people and so many factors. It's always dynamic and in motion, hard to pin down. In strongly traditional societies, like churches in the United States or Muslim villages in Niger, communities often stifle transformation because they try to keep consistency with the status quo. This can happen in a lot of ways, but it struck me one of the ways struck me when I visited a village in Niger this spring, where I heard a story about a bus driver who was just talking to a man along the side of the road who he thought was a kinsman, a comrade, just a normal guy. And then suddenly he discovered that this man was a Christian, out of line with what he thought was acceptable in his community. And so, suspicious and enraged, he poured a bottle of gasoline on this Christian pastor from a roadside stand, and he tried to light a match to set him on fire. Fortunately, the man selling the gas was able to restrain him and stop him from doing any serious damage. Despite this negative extreme, our family can also witness to a lot of other stories of positive relationships and rebuilding of relationships between Christians and Muslims in Niger. But first, I think it's important for us to realize how real the shame and the misunderstanding is in places like Niger, where there's so little education about and awareness about people outside of one's own community. Christians make up only 1% of the population in Niger, so some villages may not even remember the last time that they saw a Christian or heard about a Christian. Consequently, when someone comes to faith in Jesus, they come under severe persecution, severe pressure from their family not to bring this kind of difference and this kind of shame into their family. As I was preaching from this parable in our home church in Niger this spring, I had to think about and approach this story from the perspective of the people I knew sitting in the pews who had to return to their families, return to their fathers, bringing the same kind of heavy shame with them. So I want to cut to the point about the parable in light of this kind of shame and honor culture that West Africa shares with the Middle East. The heart of the parable is that the Father, or God here, wants sons and daughters, not independent hired hands. We can see this meaning unfolding when the younger son says in his speech preparation that he wants to go back and be a certain kind of servant. In the original Greek of the text, the word means that he would be an independent craftsman who would be hired by his father. This could allow him to then earn back the money that he had lost and keep some of his honor and keep some of his freedom from his father. But then, when he actually does come back, the father sacrifices all of his honor to take on the shame of the son. The father saves the son from the traditions of shame and scorn that he would have experienced in the village by himself shamefully running out to meet the son, to accept him back without a punishment. This amazing grace that the Father shows transforms the son's outlook. The son then drops the part about being an independent hired worker in what he actually says. Now he's ready to make the costly sacrifice himself of giving up his independence, of giving up his desire to get off with everything on his own terms. It must be his thankfulness and his joy of being accepted back fully as a son that allows him to give up these things and follow the Father. Now he's ready to receive all the wholeness and all the messiness that goes along with the responsibility of a son to follow and to stay close to the Father. After spending some time reflecting on this parable and thinking about my work of helping the church impact communities in Niger, I saw how this gracious change for wholeness and for connection is really our best way forward in trying to help communities experience transformation. But still, we have the reality that community is inherently difficult. And this difficulty is a major element of our parable. Community with the Father is a free gift that the Father offers so graciously, but community costs you something. For the Son to live in the community that he's offered, it costs him his independence as a response. It costs him the ability to get through without being affected. If this parable speaks to what we do here in church or as a church, and if it speaks to what we want to do to help communities in Niger, I think it speaks to the ways that we often resist community with God. And then we resist community with the larger world around us that God loves, especially people in far-off countries. It's pretty easy to see as individuals that there are many things that can hold us back from community, whether in our neighborhood or school or church. It seems like if something's going to interrupt our convenience or if it's going to keep us from doing the individual things we want to do, then we're definitely going to be tempted to shy away from these costs and these benefits of community. The other day, as I was buying an app in the App Store, which now we can download things in the U.S., it's kind of nice, but I was thinking about how if you could buy community in an app store, we would probably most likely opt for the free Community Lite version, the one that has lots of in-app purchases available, but we figure that we'll just get the free version and do what we can, and maybe we can do those add-ons in the future when we're ready to take on the more costly parts of the app. But to think a little more low-tech and a little further away from us, to think about villages in Niger. Villages there more commonly will hold back from true community because of being divided into factions between families that are the haves and family groups that are the have-nots. And then to think even more on a global perspective, we've seen that villages can often hold back in certain ways from community with others when the others are people from outside trying to come in and help them. This is much like how we, in our individual lives, seek our own independence and often hold back from God, who is continually reaching out to help us. But we've seen a major factor in villages resisting community with outside organizations is outside organizations that come in to help them don't have a clear connection to their own cultural system of giving and receiving favors. So then when a person with resources from the outside and who's outside the system comes in, they're not seen as a normal person. They're just seen as an unattached object or a mechanical gift bringer. It's been well documented in popular books like Toxic Charity or When Helping Hurts that doing non-community-based aid in these places actually breaks down the expectations of responding with responsibility to a gift. As this has been going on for 10 or 20 or 30 years in some villages, there's a feeling that if something runs out, well, then the thing to do is just wait until someone will bring more. And there's a feeling of entitlement that we want to get all the things we can on our own terms. This is a real breakdown of community, a real breakdown of sharing reciprocity with people in our sphere of relationships, no matter how far away that is. It tends to make people act selfishly, or make people act like helpless victims when there's no real investing in community from person to person, no real connection or necessity to change in the dynamic of a give and take relationship. But now, coming a little closer to home, our churches here in the U.S. can often display similar ways of acting, shying away from real community with God and real community with others because of our independence. In many churches, there's a lack of a sense of community with the neighborhood surrounding us, or maybe with brothers and sisters around the world. We can often hold back from deeper community with these others because of the distance, or because of the language, or because of culture. And then there's always the confusing mess of knowing what is really needed in each circumstance. Add to that the sneaky tendency of not wanting to change what we've always done together, and the lovely problem of having so many options now in a technology-flattened world where so many people relate to so many different places. It's hard to choose what to be involved with. As usual, it's not too difficult to point the finger at what the problems are, what things hold us back from deeper community. But the point we want to get to is, what is true health and what is transformation? What do these things look like in the situations where we so often resist community? And what brings about the possibility of transformation? So we have to ask, what brings about transformation and what opens up real community in this parable that we've read this morning? I think it's the rawness of the good news. It's the good news being embodied by the Father in giving of oneself and thereby opening up real connection and real sharing. It's the costly grace that's shown by the Father that confronts the Son and brings about transformation in the Son. That's our biggest hope of how to bring real transformation in our own communities and in communities around the world. So I'm excited to have the chance to come and talk a little bit about what we're doing in Niger and the strategy that we're trying to implement there that's built on this kind of embodying the good news. After a lot of years of trying many different things, Presbyterian mission co-workers that have gone before us have found that the strategy called Community Health Evangelism, or CHE, is a great way to show people the grace of God and the path toward community transformation. Now, this strategy is not similar to many short-term relief strategies that often only distribute Band-Aid stopgaps and hope people will catch on. I think we need to hear about this strategy because it shares a lot of similarities with our parable. Its central roots are that it costs something to be in real community. And it takes a connection to God to really come to health together as a community. It emphasizes that spiritual and physical health and solutions are linked together. So true health and true community go together, and these things can only come in our connection with God rather than trying to be independent from God. This means we must stay closely connected to the good gifts and to the grace that God is continually giving us to share with our communities. So we're excited to be working with the CHE strategy in helping to work for community transformation because God's grace and community is central to it. But CHE is able to introduce these things in new places in a variety of different ways. It usually starts from teaching people to first think about their problems. Think about what is tearing apart or plaguing their community, and then what their community has to help put these things back together themselves. It points them to basic practices that they can put in place as a family first and then grow larger as a community in order to live in a healthier way, in order to use their own God-given gifts to address their problems. It points them as well to think about the stories and the message of Jesus, to integrate those truths that he teaches into the way that they relate to each other and relate to God. So it's really a way of discipleship to help people follow Jesus and follow a way of transforming their community as a response. Some quick examples: if stomach sickness is what's claiming a lot of the children's lives in the community, then there are some simple local ways to build latrines or to purify water in the sun or to set up hand washing stations without running water. And then these teachings about how to work with water can be related to Jesus' teachings about the spring of life gushing up within us, the living water that never runs dry. Also, if major time and energy is spent finding firewood to cook food because the desert continues to encroach and deforestation is a major problem in many areas in Niger, well, there are simple teachings to help people build clay furnaces that use 60% less firewood to cook a single meal. Then teachings can be added onto that about good stewardship and taking care of the creation that God has entrusted us with. So we see that the Che method really has the chance to lead to health and community transformation in these villages in Niger that struggle so much with constant food shortages, with incapacitating sicknesses, with struggling to support all their children, and now recently finding the radicalization of youth because of lack of education and opportunities. But the potential of Che comes about because of this element of people sacrificing their personal independence and their attempts to take things on their own terms the way that they always have done. It has the key element of being shown the grace that we have in connection to God, and then being confronted with the good results that come with engaging in true, costly community together. I think this has the same elements as what leads to true health for the son in our parable. For him, true health is being a son who's connected to the Father, who's connected to the work and the desires of the Father, and then who naturally receives benefits of that relationship and that connection. But I think the challenge is also out there for us. What does true health look like in our community? What does true health look like for us individually? As I read and studied this parable more and more this spring, I realized what true health would look like for me in Niger in this season of my life. I was struggling with the balance of what is enough for me to do as a mission co-worker working with the church there. There's so many needs all around, so many things that need to be done, and I can't do everything, nor am I supposed to be doing everything. One thing I realized was that I'll never be able to speak as fluently as a native Nigerian or teach as culturally appropriately as a native Nigerian. But what I can do is I can help Nigerian teachers get better education, have more tools, have financial resources to finance their education. And so these are the things that have been my focus with working with the church. But I continue to struggle with the balance of whether that is really enough to travel thousands of miles and spend so much time doing. If that's enough, then I don't really have to do much further agonizing work of learning the language more deeply to be able to teach things more deeply. Then I don't have to go through more of feeling incompetent or feeling lost or just plain not able to put things together any better than a 3-year-old in an adult conversation. I normally like to think of myself as a pretty competent person who can learn just about anything, but to dive into this native language in the area where we are, it's just felt like I can't keep up with people in everyday conversations. Feels like I'm drowning in a pit of sinking sand at times. And so for my pride and my mental health and my convenience, it'd be much nicer to just be able to avoid that and say, I'm doing enough work with helping the church. The whole language thing isn't as necessary. But I've realized that as I respond gratefully to the grace that I continually see from God, this pushes me to a more costly response, to follow God into the messiness of learning a language that I feel like I could drown in. Because that's part of being in closer community with my brothers and sisters around me. Part of having and showing true love for them is to step in with them and be on their own terms in their own language. If I'm not willing to open myself up to that kind of response, then I'm trying to keep my own independence, trying to keep my own pride and freedom from God, my Father, and from my brothers and sisters around me, just like the younger son. So true health and community for me in this season is reaching out and being invested in the culture and the people enough to do the messy work of learning their language and trying to be connected in a deeper way. But what about true health for people in the U.S., for U.S. churches, trying to be in community with God's children all around the world? I know that it will look different in each circumstance, but I have to think it's going to be related to the true health and the true community that we see modeled in this parable of Jesus. I think it's probably going to look something like people in a church offering help to others who aren't just abstract or disconnected people, but are people that they have contact with, that they know something about. It seems like these sorts of helping relationships will only truly be healthy if there's some real personal cost on both sides, and so there's some accountability that goes both ways, people here in the U.S. and people in other places, both inputting costly things. But how is this brought about in individual life or in a specific church? I wish I had some easy answers to throw out, but what we do have is this example of community transformation coming after costly grace is shown. True healthy community will probably also need a costly response of giving up convenience and giving up some independence in order to really connect with people around us. We hope that this same idea of giving up our independence to God in response to His grace can have a transformational effect on our lives and on the communities that we're involved with. The challenge is there for us all to evaluate whether we're acting like the younger son, trying to act as an independent worker from God, connected only in superficial ways to what God is doing. Or are we yielding our independence to act as sons and daughters, ready to follow God, using our resources that God has given us to help with the community around us? Are we doing the costly things of true community that comes with truly being connected to God and others, no matter whether they're right around us or around the world? But as we process this challenge, and as we encourage you to think about being even more involved with communities in Niger, I also want us to keep in focus that we're not able to make these costly steps for community on our own. Only God's love can really propel us forward in these efforts. So let us rely on God, who continually comes out to us with grace and confronts us with God's way of transformation, being in community with God.